This is an interview with Dr. Charlton Prather, Dr. Charlton Prather, also known as Skeeter in the blacksmithing community. It's August 9th, 2014 at Clyde and Vi Payton's Forge, where we have had a wonderful day. And Skeeter, I don't know how old you are or your birthday or any of those words.
Why is that important to longevity?
It's not.
Oh, well, I can tell you, I celebrated my 39th birthday one time. Yeah, I did.
All right.
And I will tell you, because I'm proud of my age, I'm 84, proceeding to 85 very rapidly.
All right. So we're going to ask you to go over how you got into blacksmithing, how you got involved with FABA, what your role you see FABA has in blacksmithing, a little bit about the family, how it's played out as a tradition in your family as well as in Florida. And first of all, let's see how did you get into blacksmithing to begin with?
Oh, thank you for that, because I date the beginning of my blacksmithing when I was 7 years old. I lived very close to the community blacksmith shop in my hometown of Jasper, Florida. And the back door to the blacksmith shop really bordered the perimeter of our property, and from our back door to the blacksmith's back door was 35 of my dad's paces of steps. I lived that close. My best friend at that age, indeed from birth on, I think, was the nephew of the blacksmith. He from Congress, and the school that we attended was maybe 50 yards in another direction from our back door. And my good friend named Jake lived on the other side of town. It was very common for after school he would come to my house and we would play. And a favorite place to play was the blacksmith's scrap iron junkyard. And there was a lot of things we could play in there. But Jake's uncle, Mr. Milton, the owner of the blacksmith shop, he didn't mind us playing. And he would commonly warn us to be careful. But one afternoon he asked me and Jake, would we like to be employed by the blacksmith shop? We were 7. Each of us were 7. And of course, we would like to be employed. And he employed us, the two of us, to come in late at the end of the day and put back up the tools, all the tools that had been distributed, because he had 2 forges running all the time, 2 master smiths, plus him. He did other things in the shop, including he had a machine shop and a carpenter shop. He made wagons from scratch to nothing. He enclosed the sides of trucks, enclosed the side of trucks to put slats on them where a pickup truck could haul cows, for example. Yeah, he did all of that. So there was a lot of tools at the end of the day, and we learned early where they went. I look back on that as a terribly valuable experience, because I learned the name of all the blacksmith tools, and through chatting with the 2 master blacksmiths and a couple of helpers that he had, we knew what they were used for, and we hung them up. And for that, both Jake and I got a nickel a week, and we were paid every Saturday afternoon by Mr. Milton, and usually with a thank you. But over time, it got to where Jake was older. He's now riding his bicycle to school, and he was showing up less and less often for the afternoon job in the blacksmith shop. And since I lived next door, almost inside the blacksmith shop, I did it. And on the afternoon of my 9th birthday, the day of my 9th birthday, I went over to the shop for my regular daily duties, and when I went in, Mr. Milton said, "Hey, today's your birthday. We're going to have to do something special for your birthday." This is a small town. Everybody knew everybody. It's one of these communities, if you were caught bad on the other side of town, some parent whopped you real good, sent you home, and always before you get home, your dad or mom already knew about it, and you got another whopping when you got home. It's one of those. Mr. Milton knew every kid, and he knew everybody else in Jasper, our hometown, and obviously knew my birthday. So he said, "We're going to have to do something special for your birthday, and I've decided what we're going to do. Come on, help me." And he proceeded to make for me, in a period of 20 or 30 minutes, a cross-peen hammer from a piece of 1.25 inches, as I'm remembering it, 1.25 inches square something that he punched a hole in, drew down the peen, dressed the face and the side, and tempered the face. And it was all cool. He said, "Happy birthday to you. Now tomorrow, come in a little early and go down to the wood shop and get you a piece of wood and make yourself a handle for this hammer," which I did. That was my 9th birthday. I date the beginning of my blacksmithing from that 9th birthday present.
Yeah.
Because I continued to work there, putting up tools, but also began to be a helper and a handyman for the smiths that were in there, or for the carpenters that were in there. And I got increases in salary for doing that. But by the time I was in the 11th grade, I guess, 10th or 11th grade, I had my own hammering job. You remember this was the latter part of the Great Depression, and the money was still tight on the part of the farmers. So if a farmer needed a sweep, a blade sharpened, he brought it to the blacksmith shop, because the blacksmith shop would use his forge for hammering out a new blade rather than grinding off. And we did lots of that. But along when the latter part of my sophomore year, beginning of my junior year, I was assigned by Mr. Milton to resharpen all the sweeps of less than 14 inches wide. I had difficulty with those bigger. The 14 gave me a little trouble too, to trying to get it on the anvil and do what I needed to do. But during the course of their daily work, a farmer would bring in sweeps for sharpening. If they were 14 inches or smaller, it went into a particular pile. That was my pile. And typically on a Saturday, for an all-day affair, I would go in and have my own forge, and we'd sharpen those sweeps. As I'm remembering, for the smaller sweeps, Mr. Milton got 15 cents for sharpening them. Of that, I got a nickel. I got a nickel per sweep for sharpening, and a little bit more went up a little bit with the bigger sweeps. But that was my job. By the time I was a senior in high school, still working, one of the master smiths was a black man by the name of Slick. Sorry, I can't tell you his last name. But he kind of took a liking to me and took me under his wing and let me do a lot of significant hammering on his anvil. Oh, by the way, Mr. Milton built me a little stool, because on his anvil I was too short. And he built me a little stool to bring me up to height of his anvil. And it would sit there, and I'd stand on that stool when I was doing hammering. But Slick took me on. And by the time I was a senior, I was accepted as a smith and was given the keys to the truck. When a farmer would come in and he had hung his plow in a stump. And I'm 15 miles out yonder. I can't bring it to you. Would you come out and fix it? And we would. We did house calls. Mr. Milton did house calls. And when I was a senior, I was trusted to take the pickup truck, portable forge, whatever tools I thought we needed, and a helper. And we'd go to the field. Typically, this is red hot summer now. Hope you appreciate that. And go out where the tractor plow was hung up on a stump. Then find out what to do with it and proceed to correct it and fix it right then. I had really arrived. One, we didn't have a car. My family did not own a car, but I knew how to drive because I drove tractors with my uncle. Too. But then during my senior year, about the time I was getting ready to go off to college, the blacksmith shop closed because business had decreased so much. And one, he couldn't even afford to keep himself there as the only smith. And he had started the shop as a one-man smith. This piece of background I thought was of interest. He had been employed by a company who was opening a crate plant in Jasper. They made crates for the citrus industry in Central Florida, the crates that oranges and grapefruits and things like that are packed in. Many of those were made in a crate factory in Jasper. And when it was opening, Mr. Milton was brought in from somewhere by the company to help set up that plant, to get the ironwork or do whatever is necessary. And when the plant was open, he just moved downtown and opened a blacksmith shop. A good piece of history on Mr. Milton there. But he closed up and I went off to school. You probably don't believe it, I actually went to college. And I went to the University of Florida. Yeah, the university. It's in Gainesville, in case you want to know. I'm aware, Dr. Eddie, that you had spent a little time there. Yeah, and you got a tough gator hide. I'm aware of that. So you were there long enough to develop the proper attributes of a gator hide.
You've grown a stronger one living in Tallahassee, haven't you?
Yes, I have. I've actually grown a second layer. And blacksmithing, the shop closed, and I went off to college, and was terribly interested in the fun of shaping hot iron. I was really caught by that, and knew that one day I was going to have a forge, private forge, for my fun pleasure. And in due course, I went off to medical school. Most folks find that hard to believe, and I actually graduated, don't you know that? But in medical school during my senior year, this is a significant piece of my blacksmithing history that I want you to be aware of. The professor of physiology was talking to our class in a lecture about a special retractor he had designed for getting to the posterior of a dog's heart without screwing up the physiology of the heart. And he drew us a picture of it on the blackboard and allowed that he had gone to every machine shop in Winston-Salem and nobody would tackle it. A number of them told him that it will take a blacksmith to get all that done. We can't do that. But there's no blacksmith in Winston-Salem that I can find in the phone book. So after class, I went up and told him that I'd had some experience in hammering hot iron and that I'd like to try to see if I could do that. If he could give me an exact drawing, a to scale, not necessarily to scale, but give me the measurements of it. And let me see if I could do it. Well, he did. He brought it to me the next time the class met, which was a couple or 3 days later. And that weekend, I got the phone book and looked up failures because I knew I would need a fire and I would need welding capability, fire welding capability. And the old people, since he had said there's no blacksmiths, I knew that farriers used fires and did welding and had the necessary stuff. So I went to the phone book and looked up farriers. First one I called, there was 6 or 8 listed in the phone book. First one I called, told him what I was interested in doing. He said, sure, I think that'd be fun. When you want to come? And we arranged for the next Saturday. He told me how to get there and where to come. And in the meantime, I went by a scrap iron place and picked up some half-inch round and some 3/8-inch round scrap, just little pieces. That's all I needed. And proceeded to his house, and by noon we had completed, or I had completed that thing. And the fairy and I became friends, by the way, as a result of that. And he and I stayed in communication for the rest of my time in medical school. But I never visited him again. He invited me lots of times to go racing with him or come with him and do some stuff, because I told him my experience in blacksmithing. And he was a farrier. He knew how to shape shoes and to get them in. But this other finite stuff of moving steel, how you use your horn, and how useful the step is for doing finite bending, he'd never seen done before, which I did for both of those things. And we worked up a friendship, which I thought was great. So, carried that piece that I'd finished, and it looked just like the drawing. It measured just like the drawing. Carried it into him, carried it to his desk the next time that we were having a class. And he brought it out. He brought it out to show the class that Skeeter had done that. And talked about it. Two important things from that. He gave me $50. That was enough in 1955 to feed me and my wife and child a month. That was very significant, $50. And he talked about to my peers, my classmates, that I'd done this blacksmithing, that they didn't know anything about. And after that, it kind of became my nickname among my medical school peers, BS. Standing for blacksmith now.
Yes,
But they enjoyed calling me, hey, BS. But it's okay. Then I knew that really worked me up. I enjoyed doing that little project. But it was some years later, I knew all along that once we ever got settled, I was going to build a forge and rejuvenate my great interest in forming hot iron. Because I thoroughly enjoyed doing it. And after medical school, 7 years later, 7 more years after medical school, that I settled into a real job. Those were the years of my internship and residency. And we finally finished my schooling and moved from Tampa to Orange Park, Florida.
got all grown up.
And we got all grown up. Yeah, we had 2 kids now, too. 2 children. And bought a house with a nice piece of property surrounding it. And I picked out the site of my blacksmith shop before we actually closed on this house. The house came with a large woodworking shop, which was already there.
Wow.
Very nice. And I didn't want to tear up the woodworking shop because I enjoy woodworking too. And so proceeded to give great attention to that. But the house was an old house and had shutters, had some shutters on the windows when we bought it. But a number of the shutters were missing, and the little hinges that keep the shutters on were obviously hand-wrought. Looking at them, they were handmade. They were not machine stamped out. And early moving into that house was the need to redo shutters for the outside appearance of the house. And the wife was agitating for us to proceed to get those shutters back up. And since most of the shutters were up with hand-wrought hinges, I didn't want to go to the store and buy some and have them different. I wanted hand-wrought ones too. And I tried to find a blacksmith in Jacksonville, Orange Park, anywhere around. And I found some advertised blacksmiths, and I carried them up at sample. This is what I want. I want 7, I think. 7 of these made. None of the blacksmiths, I think I consulted with 3 blacksmiths, none of which would accept the charge to make these for me. 2 of them allowed I can go down to the store and buy you those for 1/10 of what I would charge you to make them. So I'd have to charge you much to make them. I'm not going to do it. Okay. But still looking around for a blacksmith, I read in the paper that St. Augustine, the Spanish community in St. Augustine, had recently opened a blacksmith shop and had hired a blacksmith. Wow, that was in the Jacksonville papers. The next Saturday, family and I went to St. Augustine to see that blacksmith. And he was nice. He'd been on the job by this time 3 weeks. He had just learned how to fire the forge to keep a coal fire going.
But he was willing.
Very willing. And that he had been laid off by the East Coast Railroad, that he was a pipe fitter, and he needed a job. And blacksmithing deals with metal, pipe fitting deals with metal. He applied to the job he was hired. You know, and so I told him what I was going to do there. He looked at it. I don't have a slide sign here. How to even start with this. That's good. I said, I know how to do it, but I don't have a forge. There's one.
There's one.
Yeah, there's one.
And I desperately need to know how to be a blacksmith.
Yeah. It was a late afternoon by the time we were doing all this, and I made an appointment to come back the next Saturday. Come back early, and I would bring iron that would me to do it, and then maybe he and me together could whoop out those 7 little things. It had a T. It had a T, and cross arm was welded to the upright. Very simple lap weld, very simple. And that's all was required. The rest of it was just simple bending and putting the peg in to do them. They were blacksmithing wise, very simple things. So I went down, had the iron that I needed. I didn't have a hammer. He had a decent hammer. I had no blacksmith equipment. None.
You'd lost your hammer.
Oh yeah, but I'll come back to that hammer. Yeah, I had. I don't know if I can come back to that or not. That's very emotional to me, David. I might cry.
I have a very big attachment to my hammers, so I understand.
Yeah. But we did. I went down to the drugstore and bought some borax. Little guy bought a little box of borax, and he and I put together those seven latches that Saturday. The family didn't go. I went by myself, and ended up over the next several years spending several days with this particular blacksmith, and thoroughly enjoyed my visits with him. And he became quite proficient, but he was primarily for entertaining public, not for reproducing things. And when the Spanish village, all a part of the Department of State at the time, if they needed something special, he would say, Skeeter will be over here on such and such a Saturday, we'll make them then. And we did. And that was fun. But in due course, still within the same year, I saw at a junkyard a lever-operated Craftsman's, Dunlap rivet forge. It seemed to be in good shape, except it didn't have his belt with it. I bought it. I bought that. I think I paid him $2. $2, put a leather belt on it, and it was a marvelous forge. It's still around. I used that for years until I built a masonry forge in Orange Park. And over here, sold it to Jerry Grice for one book. Because I had gotten $10 million worth of use out of it. But back to my hammer. As I said, most folks don't believe it, but I went off to college. And I have a brother who is 8 years my younger. And when I got out of college, he was wanting to gather my personal stuff back up. Like my hammer, like a microscope that I acquired when I was in the 10th grade of high school. Like some 3 boxfuls of perfect arrowheads gathered from the fields around Jasper. You could ask my brother the week of his death. You remember that hammer? He said, yeah. That was a perfect hammer. Had the most balance of any hammer I've ever used. Where's it? Oh, no. He don't know. I've never seen it since I left for college. That's where my blacksmith hammer went. I should have killed him. But that had been illegal. The same was true. In his, as I said, he's 8 years my younger. They got into archery, shooting things. Well, make arrowheads. My brother's got all these arrowheads.
Oh, God.
And they ended up, so Gwen tells me, using dog fiddles and bamboo rods, and they would tie my arrowheads on it for arrowheads. No use trying to find the arrows. Just putting arrowheads back there at the house. That's where my arrowheads went. And rest his soul, my dear brother. Became very, very fascinated with germs when I was in the 9th grade in high school.
Go figure.
I won't go into that, but I was overwhelmed with interest in germs and managed to acquire a microscope with a 1100 magnification that I could see germs, real germs, under it. And when sometime after I left for college, with my microscope back at the house, the lens my brother thought was fuzzy. So he thought that an ice pick going down through those little holes would clean it up. And it did. You could see very clear through it when he got the ice pick through it. I have the frame still now with the microscope. And can see the broken edges of the broken lens inside of that microscope today. He actually apologizes for that. He really apologized repeatedly for, in his ignorance, sticking a toothpick down the tube of my microscope. Oh well, I digress.
My little brother sold my bowling ball.
Oh no. Oh, no.
Hey, where'd I leave my bowling ball? Bowling ball? You had a bowl? Yeah, I had a bowling ball.
Too bad. I only got $3 for it.
Right.
Well, my brother didn't sell any of my stuff far as I know. But I loved him to death. And one of his attributes was allowing that he really was committed to trying to keep the young people from smoking cigarettes. And he smoked them as fast as he could, as long as he could, to keep them out of young people's hands. And he died at 71 after some 8 years of long suffering with lung cancer. My brother did 3 years ago. But I did get a forge in Orange Park. I built a masonry forge in Orange Park in 1964 and proceeded to enjoy myself immensely. But it wasn't but a day or two before neighbors would smell my coal. Come in and see what I ain't that interested. You know, I got this little thing. Would you do it for me? And I got to where I was spending on essentially full time every Saturday doing hammering for a neighbor of one sort or another. It was fun in a sense. I didn't charge any of them anything. And thoroughly enjoyed it. Kept that forge for, we lived in Orange Park 15 years before moving to Tallahassee. And another interesting thing of our move, we had a commercial mover to bring us from Orange Park to Tallahassee when we moved here in 1976. And I had made special boxes. I had now accumulated blacksmith tools and other, accumulated blacksmith tools. And I built special boxes, wooden boxes, for bringing those things, and some prized stuff of my wife's that we put in wood boxes and did very well. But on the day that the movers came with a big truck to load up everything, there was boxes in my woodworking shop and boxes in my blacksmithing shop to be loaded, and a couple of those strong-armed men carried the blacksmith shop, and all this goes to a series 10 or 12 wooden boxes. And these two men, yes sir, and they grabbed the one on top. Whoops! Whoops, you got this nailed down somewhere? That was his first question. I said, No, now I picked that up and stacked it up there. The two of you should be able to get it down. What in the world have you got in here? It's iron. It's iron. But I was very amused at that. That they strained to pick up my blacksmith tools. But it came, but it was 2 or 3 years. I had my portable Sears Roebuck pump forge still with me. I enjoyed that. I enjoyed that little forge. And it traveled with me a little bit during the mid and late 70s. I remember going to Thomasville, some sort of fair they had. And one of my associates was in Thomasville and knew that I hammered iron and was somehow involved with the festival activity in Thomasville. That was the first time I had ever been invited to go on the road and do some hammering. And I did. And I used my little pump forge to do that. But following that, I did. I'm trying to remember. We moved here in '76. I guess '78, '79, before my new masonry forge got put up at my home in Tallahassee. It works. It's a side draw, coal burning blacksmith forge. It works absolutely superbly. I like to tell people once it's going, it'll suck a rising on the back of your neck. If you'll stand right here.
It does beautifully.
It sucks very well. It's a good forge. And beginning with that in Thomasville, I was getting invitations to a lot of festivals and fairs to come as a blacksmith. In the interim, I built a portable forge that's much more appropriate with a centrifugal mechanical fan to go with it. And I accepted invitations. I soon learned that the reason that I was so much in demand was I didn't charge any fees for going. Some of the places, in most of the places, I was free to sell, but I quit that rather soon. I noticed that I was being sold, I was giving away more than I was selling. Some of it I knew I was giving away, but when the end of the day, when I counted up, some of that was given away and I didn't know I was giving it away.
Didn't know how generous you were.
That's right. And over the years, through the mid-'80s, I guess, from the early 80s to late 80s, oh no, into the late 1990s, into the 20th century sometimes. I've attended scores and scores of festivals and demonstrations from Key West.
So when did you help to build your first forge for somebody else?
I think that was member Ed. It's not my age, David. It's my memory.
Ed Crane?
Ed Crane. Dr. Ed Crane. I think he's the first one that spent weeks at my house getting measurements off of my forge. And I really didn't help him much, but I watched him a lot as he laid the bricks for his. That was the first one. And Bill Robinson and Patty Draper spent a lot of time at my house measuring theirs, and they built a side draw forge exactly as mine at their home. And I didn't help with that either. And when the Blacksmith Association, was building the association blacksmith shop at the Panhandle Pioneer Center in Bluntstown, measurements again were taken from my forge and transferred there. And that forge was put up by a lot of us. No one person handled all the cement, the concrete, and the bricks for that. Ed bought brand new bricks. Bill Robinson bought brand new bricks. Panhandle brought brand new bricks. But I cleaned old concrete off of every one of my bricks And it sure does work well. A guy from, there's one in Jacksonville that looks like mine. There's one in Stark that I know about that looks like mine. All those folks. But I got them. I got those plans out of some blacksmith periodical. Not Alabama, not Florida's, but something that I was subscribing to that had plans for a forge. And the critical measurement, that forge was made from field, the one in the plan that I got, was made from field stone. And it's beautiful pictures of it. But the critical thing is the internal measurements. You know? So you get the internal measurements right, then you can do facade on the outside any way you want to. You know? So that's what I did. And the internal measurements are critical.
But you helped me by building me a little holder for my forge, the table for my forge, and
I've done a lot of those.
Right, that's what I'm thinking. You kicked a lot of people in the butt to get them. You know, you short circuited the process, because I would have had a forge in the next couple of years, but you showed up with the table and said, "Okay, put your fire pot in here, get to work." And
have you ever? It was made from 2x4s, as I recall.
2x4s and a sheet.
Did you ever burn it up?
I've replaced all of the wood, but I replaced it piece by piece, so it's still there.
Was it burned or rotted?
Rotted.
Rotted. It didn't. No, don't let that burn, because I guaranteed that wood would not burn.
It didn't burn. It got baked.
Yeah.
The sides got baked, and then something happens when there's a part that's missing after a while.
Yep.
And I replaced those, and then the legs got and then I replaced and so it's still the same thing. It's just all different.
Yeah. Now there's a bunch of those that I've done. You know, I need to take a break. For those, my son began his blacksmithing with one of those.
Yeah.
My younger son is, I consider, an almost master blacksmith. He really has finesse with hot iron, my younger son.
How'd you get him how did he get started in the blacksmith?
In Orange Park. In Orange Park on my forge before we moved to Tallahassee. The young son got very interested in shaping hot iron. The older son figured out it was too hot and he wasn't interested a bit. So he's an academic. He doesn't particularly enjoy working with his hands. The older son. He's got a lot of positives. Now, one of them is not working with his hands. Skeeter, the younger son, has very little academic interest. Overwhelmed with what he can do with his hands. And it's amazing what our son can do with his hands. It really is.
Blacksmithing and carpentry, or
Yeah.
cabinet making?
Mechanical. He'll take down your automobile engine, straight out the parts over there, replace everything to be used, needs to be replaced, and put it back together for you. One of those.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's great.
Plus his trucks. He can do his trucks that way too.
But didn't he build a large barn, or?
That's where he makes his living. He builds things horse. It largely, but the majority of he's a contractor, and the majority is probably
3-horse stall in the backyard there.
not typically. Yeah, he's done a bunch of those. He's done a bunch of those. But no, he's in the process of finishing a $2.8 million 28 stall barn.
Wow.
Up out of Bainbridge, out of a small plantation up there of 970 square miles of acreage in this small little plantation up there.
Acres, maybe.
No,
Square miles.
Square miles. No. The owner owns an airplane to go from one end to the other.
Yeah.
We were nicely interrupted, Dr. Reddy. I was talking about my travels blacksmithing, which I thoroughly enjoyed. And carried a portable forge and me and over the years developed a system of transporting and carrying and making that I call an anvil horse. And the anvil, oh, by the way, it's a Sears Roebuck anvil, is my portable anvil, a Dunlap. The anvil that came with the Sears Roebuck blacksmithing sets during the 1920s, that I have, that I enjoy. And some of those travels carried me to White Springs, the place where I consider the Florida Center for the Crafts, a series of buildings built there, all of which are modeled after a old building in Hamilton County somewhere. And the architect that designed this heritage village there, I was privileged to be contacted and consulted over the construction of those buildings and counsel on places in Hamilton County where he might find an old building that would be appropriate. That was fun. And I did. I participated in his design of the blacksmith shop that is a part of that facility there, which is fun to remember because the building he designed for the blacksmith shop is close to the gift shop and kind of centered in 3 other buildings. And when the state fire marshal came to certify to the adequacy of these buildings and to allow them to become occupied, the story is, I was not there, that the fire marshal standing in this building was destined to become the blacksmith shop. And he asked, what's this building to be used for? And was told by the architect and the other important people who were present that this will be the blacksmith shop. And I'm told that the fire marshal says, no it won't. And he proceeded to identify that this is a fire risk, it's too close to the others. And if you want a blacksmith shop, I see we've been to the farrier's shop, which is down yonder in the woods. It was built there as a farrier's shop because a back entrance into the park, the horses and wagons, could be easily brought into that building. So that building became the blacksmith shop and the farrier's shop and those sorts of things. It's worked out very well. The blacksmith shop is kind of down in the woods, away from the center, but it's still found by the tourists. And need not I remind you, Dr. Eddie, but I was privileged to participate in setting up the blacksmith shop at the Stephen Foster State Park that I like to call the Florida Center for the Crafts. I was privileged to help set up that, to help equip that shop and get it started. And I recall with great interest and great pleasure that the anthropologists who were stationed, the state anthropologists of the Department of State of Florida, were stationed and officed in the White Springs, the state park vicinity, and were very interested in documenting. They wanted to set this blacksmith shop circa 1900, and hopefully a blacksmith shop of the area that could be duplicated at this spot. And I was privileged to be in on the ground floor of much of this discussion and talked about the blacksmith shop just 17, 18 miles away over in Jasper that I grew up in myself. The highlight of that was that 2 of the children of Mr. Moulton, 2 of the sons, in fact a daughter or 2 survives also, but the 2 sons had grown up in that blacksmith shop. Both had become master blacksmiths in that blacksmith shop prior to the Second World War. And both were still living in the late 70s, I guess, or early 80s, when we were working on the blacksmith shop for the Stephen Foster State Park. And the anthropologists there used their influence to bring one of the brothers from Jacksonville, Robert Milton, and another brother who had spent a career in the military, had retired to Jasper, to the banks of the Swanee River, actually, lived in Hamilton County. But the anthropologists used their influence and got both of those men to come to this building that was destined to become the blacksmith shop. Sat them down, and I was privileged to be present also. But questioned those old blacksmiths, who are young men, kind of. Robert is only 3 years older than me. He's really a young man, but he's now dead, by the way. So is Baynard, the older brother. But it was a happy 3 or 4 hours for me, sitting there with those guys of my childhood in that blacksmith shop that I knew both of them very well. Really, Robert as a childhood friend, and Baynard, the older brother. He was an older brother, but I considered him a friend too. But I was a very, 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 very young youngster when he was doing very significant master-type blacksmithing in his father's shop. It was a privilege to be involved with the inauguration and the furnishing of that particular shop. And it has. I've seen pictures of that shop in national publications all over the place. It is, I don't think it has become famous per se, but its picture has really had wide distribution. But it's lost its ambience, Dr. Reddy. It's lost its ambience of a 1900 shop. Last time I was there, it looked like a hodgepodge of a whole bunch of different blacksmiths bringing in what they thought should be there. And it has no semblance of a 1900 shop whatsoever today. But apparently they do good tourist entertaining at it. And I hope that they're talking blacksmithing. I haven't been there to hear any blacksmiths talk, but I hope they do. Yeah. They still get the message across, even in that shop. Yeah. Now, since my retirement from state government, I was employed by state government for 35 years, 6 months, 27 days, 1¼ hours. All of that with the state public health organization. Marvelous career. Chasing germs, by the way, in a title that they would cause a germ detective, disease detective, or an epidemiology. Yeah. And I served as state epidemiologist for the state of Florida for
putting out fires.
Putting out epidemic fires.
Yeah.
Epidemic fires, yeah, of all varieties and types of things. A fascinating career. But after retirement from state government, my blacksmithing accentuated, really, because in just 3 weeks before retirement, I saw an advertisement in my Tallahassee Democrat that the Mission San Luis, a Spanish mission in Tallahassee, was looking for docents. And I knew about Mission San Luis. And I have a great interest in Florida history in every sense. And I was looking for something, I was looking for a closure period for my retirement. That was a challenge. And I went to an orientation activity at designated time, as reported in the paper, that they were looking for docents for the mission. And I signed up. And I am still a docent and very active there. In due course, there was a number of us at that particular orientation. There was a person who was very interested in foods of antiquity, who had done a special study of early Spanish foods. She was a nutritionist PhD nutritionist on the Department of Nutrition at Florida State University. There was a retired Navy captain who presented himself that evening. It was a lady who was especially interested in old-timey clothing, antique clothing, of what the Spanish might have done. Those come to mind immediately. But that was a nice core for an interpretive troop for what the Mission San Luis is. For your interest and information, the second most important Spanish site in the United States is there in Tallahassee as the Mission San Luis. The most important Spanish site in the United States is St. Augustine. Most folks, most visitors, hey, but how about the California missions? Oh, they're young squirts. It was over 100 years before they came into existence after San Luis was settled in 1639. Well, then, because of my interest in blacksmithing, and we historically knew that there had been blacksmiths there to assist with the construction of the fort, which was not there. But we had a lot of history on there was not a single building, by the way. A single reconstructed building. All of San Luis was underground. And the interpreters, the docents, they were trying to advertise themselves as a state site. And the docents were trained about what's all underground around there. And we would give tours. And we would give tours, anybody who was interested, and try to paint a mental picture of what the church looked like, what the friary looked like, and these other buildings that the archaeologists know were here. No sign of them now. It's all in the dirt.
This is just a field.
Yeah, it was in essence an open field. But in due course, this core group thought, it'd be interesting if we was to start formal interpreting. Let's dress out and let's begin to do our thing in an appropriate place and answer questions and entertain the public. That ended up with, we agreed one Saturday a month, we would all gather. The cooks would begin to cook on the open fires. The blacksmith would have a forge, and he would do blacksmithing. The captain, Navy captain, he would have trinkets that he had brought in to trade with the Indians, etc. All that. And curious enough, we rendered some resistance by the Department of State.
But this was the tail wagging the dog. The volunteers were saying, all right, we want to do this.
That's right. That's exactly what it was. So it ended up with each had to write a prospectus, who we were, what historic basis were we there, what did we propose to do to demonstrate life in the mid-1700s at that spot, and how did we propose to do it. So we wrote up, all of us wrote up a prospectus, what we did, and not a single one of them, by the way, was denied or sent back by the powers that be. Uptown, we call it, up on the hill, where the Capitol is. And with the help of the seamstress, we soon had outfits, time period appropriate. Sport Adventures late in all of that was a cobbler. I want to tell you a story about that, too, as an aside. One Saturday, we now have a blacksmith shop, a shop that was built that had a forge in it, and I was the operating blacksmith. One day I had a visitor that came up, and we had built a little cabinet that we put all of our tools in when we were not there, and it had a lock. It had a lock on it that I had made from Spanish pictures. I had made a lock for this cabinet door. And in due course, with this gentleman who was there just for interest, allowed that he was locksmith, knew that he made his living locksmithing, and wanted to know about that lock.
Yeah.
And I told him, did you make that? And I told him, yeah, I made that. But that's a funny lock. I've made that out of some Spanish patterns, and it's unique because it can't be opened without a key. He laughed. I'm a locksmith. I can get into that lock. Take what? if you get into that lock, my wife and I will buy you and your wife a steak dinner at a place of your and date of your choice. If you don't get in there, you do the same for me. You're on. Start saving your money. So I typed up a nice little piece of paper that I put inside there and said, Mr. Locksmith, if you find this piece of paper, please call me and tell me what date and place you want a steak dinner. Several weeks went by. And one Saturday afternoon, I got a call from him, and he says, I've been out here messing with this lock for 3 hours. I called to want to know where you and your wife want a steak dinner when. That was Pat Mbimbo. Do you know him?
The name's familiar.
Very active early. Pat Mbimbo. Following that little episode, he wanted to know if he could come out and learn some blacksmithing.
Yeah.
And he began to come, and he came with some frequency. And he became a prominent blacksmith in our organization, too.
So tie us into what's happening nationally. What did you get involved with before Urbana?
No, I'm a Johnny. I was blacksmithing at that time, and I was very disappointed that I didn't know that blacksmiths were gathering in Westville to organize a National Blacksmith Association. I did not know.
Were you in Tallahassee at the time?
No, I lived in Orange Park.
Huh.
I didn't know about Beeler's book at that time. I did learn about Urbana through Clyde Payton, who told me about it, and introduced me to the secretary. No, told me who the secretary was. And I just dropped a note to the secretary with the required registration, said I want to join Urbana. Let me back up 2 steps from that. I heard Mr. Payton tell you earlier about the early organizing efforts of FABA. It happened that a gentleman by the name of Willard Smith, his story and his history is a feature in the Clinker Breaker of some years ago. His whole story, there's a fascinating story, is how he got interested in blacksmithing. And if you haven't interviewed him for this historic record, I admonish you to do so.
Dot interviewed him last October.
Oh, that's very good. He probably didn't tell you the nuances as I'm fixing to tell you, because I've never heard him repeat it. But he thought it would be advantageous for himself and the other blacksmiths if somehow the Florida blacksmiths, if they would organize and utilize each other for training. His motivation was that he wanted to identify the blacksmiths of Florida and avail himself of their knowledge and techniques. That was his bottom line. To do that, he thought we just do an organization of the state's blacksmiths. Let's get them all together. This was before a first meeting in Madison that Mr. Clyde mentioned. So Willard knew about Urbana. And he got the secretary of Urbana's name and address. And lo and behold, the secretary lived in Florida. But what Mr. Smith wanted to do is get the mailing list of members of Urbana who were in Florida. It happens that I was a member of Urbana at the time. So was Clyde Payton. He was told by the secretary of Urbana, who was a resident of Florida, there wasn't sufficient blacksmiths in Florida to waste the time trying to organize them. So, Mr. Smith wrote back to national headquarters and asked for the mailing list. The secretary didn't give them to him. A Florida blacksmith did not give Willard the mailing list. Willard got it from the Urbana office. And he mailed a letter to everybody on that list, of whom I was one and Clyde was one. And there were some 35, 38 people in Florida who were members of Urbana already by that time. And he wrote them suggesting in his letter the advantages of us combining together for mutual. I thought that was a good idea. Good idea too. So the only, I think Willard asked me too, is where's an organized blacksmith shop that we can have a meeting, first meeting? and it was the Junior Museum. The Junior Museum.
Wow.
And so I told him, and he wrote us all back that, hey, let's get together at the Junior Museum, the Hazard Blacksmith Shop, on a certain date and discuss this further. We did. It was at that meeting that we agreed to organize and become the Florida Blacksmith Association or something like that. At that. But it happened that the Southeast meeting of blacksmiths was occurring the next month after we met at the Junior Museum. And the great majority of us, plus some others, who were in the Junior Museum that day, attended the Southeast Conference in Madison. That's where Clyde took it up for us to vote to become a chapter of Urbana. At that same time, we agreed to formally organize as a state blacksmith association. And that's for which we collected dues. It was the justification to publish a newsletter. And but the fact that Willard Smith is the daddy of the Florida Blacksmith Association. He's kind of funny in that way. He's the daddy of a major living history museum in Blountstown, which is the Panhandle Pioneer Settlement, a living history museum. He's also daddy of the Southern Syrup Makers Association.
I didn't know that.
For the same reason. He was getting some unhappy dialogue from the regulators in Florida over his making and selling of syrup. The Panhandle grows cane and demonstrates the making of syrup every year. They bottle it and we buy it. Well, some appropriate authorities out of Tallahassee got wind that he was selling syrup out of an unapproved kitchen.
They didn't know what it looked like either.
Well, he had some visits. The upgrowth of that was that we need to combine, we need the benefit of all of us in order to get some sense in those folks over in Tallahassee and probably in your states also. Some of whom had ran into the same problem in their state government as Willard had done in his state government. So he did the same thing. He found out everywhere he could anybody who manufactured cane syrup in the Southeast, and he wrote them. We need to organize for our self-benefit. And he served as president of the Florida Blacksmith Association for 4 or 5 terms till we could get organized. And he was really the daddy, the ramrod, the Florida Blacksmith Association until for 4 or 5 years running. And I think he's still president of the Southern Syrup Makers Association, which is now maybe 6 or 7 years old, too. And other things. I'm talking about Willard, but let him blow his own horn, which he would not do.
I was there. He didn't say a word about it. We jacked some of it out of him, but...
the city was so proud of him, the county was so proud of Willard and his wife for all that Willard and his wife Linda have done for that county, that they sent him to Europe for a 2 weeks tour. They sent him to Alaska for a 2 weeks tour to say thank you, Willard and Linda, for all you have done for Blountstown and this county. Now you can't get that out of Willard, but he is. He has been an organizer. There's some others among automobile mechanics, by the way, that I know about, that he saw benefit. We need to organize for our salary purposes. No, not union. We need you just to have some togetherness. And he organized what today would be a union of automobile mechanics to demand higher pay. And he got it. Such mundane little things. Well, but besides with San Luis, done a lot of blacksmithing. There are those who will tell you that every piece of ironwork there I've done, which is true. And just one statistic, all the buildings which are there now, a large church, a friary's house, a reconstructed Spanish house, a council house, the largest Indian construction this side of the Mississippi River is at that site. And it's there. All the iron. for that, I did. Yeah, I was privileged to do. I haven't counted it up, about 300 pairs of hinges. The one statistic that I'd like to speak of, that all the doors and shutters, and anytime two boards needed to be put together, they're put together with rivets. I was privileged to make those rivets, one at a time. And there's 3,600 of them in the structures at San Luis. Not only do I make them at my forge at my home, I also installed every one of those doors. The contractor who was responsible when it was time to put the doors together, for example, or whatever, he would assign me a worker. And me and a worker, we'd be given a place and we'd put all that stuff together with rivets. The rivets that I'd made for the purpose.
Are these like the door rivets where you see the decorative face on a door with...
and the other side, the same decorative face.
Yeah.
Through and through rivets. Peen, I made a head that goes through, then I peened the head on the other side. Real rivets, holding real doors, holding real boards together.
Yeah.
All the hinges are put on with rivets. Through and through rivets.
That's gorgeous.
All the hinges are put on with through and through rivets. Is a point of interest, I made locks. I made door locks for all the doors and padlocks for things that needed to be padded. I don't know the numbers, but 15 or so padlocks. And every one of the swinging doors has a, what do you call a door lock that's recessed into the wood.
Hasping like that?
No hasp.
No hasp.
No hasp. You run the key through a hole to get to the lock on the inside. But over the years, those, I don't know what to call those locks that actually are set into the wood of a door on the back side. The the key goes through a hole to get into the lock to make it work. But it was not long after those locks were installed, on doors put together by my rivets and me, hinges made and installed by me, the doors hung by me and my helper. Before the coming and going of the temperature in the water began to warp and screw up those doors, such that these locks got to the point where they didn't work at all.
I heard there was a problem with the wood.
With the woods expanding and contracting, yeah.
Like they got bad wood?
Yeah. Well, in due course, the ladies that hired interpreters just gave up on trying to get those doors open, which they had to open doors every morning. They were locked every night. And I understood. There were many times I was called to come over and open a door. Open a particular door. And it was. I got them all open. But obviously the door had warped and swollen and something. And I made a number of adjustments to make them work. But I got them work, and the next hard rain, they were out of kilter again. I ended up with the administration put on commercial hasps and padlocks, is the way they do them now. But all the locks are installed, and they look there. A number of the padlocks, because of the architect, number of the padlocks in the fort, a reconstructed fort built on the footmark of the original fort that was there, built and occupied in 1778. The fort was finished in 1702, and was burned by the Spanish. But a reconstructed fort has been put on that blueprint, and to the best of archaeologic and written records, of which there's a number of written records on what that fort looked like, dating from the mid 1600s.
So this got you another job. Tell me a little bit about where you beat swords into plowshares.
I did that at San Luis.
We did the ship people.
Oh, yeah. I was privileged once upon a time to be told that such luminaries as the Smithsonian folks. We're going to document the history of Narvaez, his tours looking for gold into Florida in 1623. I'm insecure with the date. But before De Soto came, a conquistador by the name of Narvaez brought his soldiers and helpers, disembarked in Tampa with the idea of marching north into Florida, collecting their amount of gold, and meeting their three ships in a recognized harbor that is now Pensacola. He disembarked in Tampa, and he and his soldiers proceeded overland with the idea of meeting his ships that he sent on to Pensacola to pick him up. I think he gave himself 6 months to get there. I'm insecure with how long. But he had a scribe with him that all of the conquistadors did. The Spanish were worse, I think, than the American government for keeping everything in writing. But a scribe, secretary, came with the Narvaez by the name of Navacas. He kept a diary. He kept a very excellent diary of the Narvaez trip, the Narvaez expedition. And his diary reports that they proceeded north from one Indian village to another, not finding any gold, being told at every Indian village that the gold is in the next village on up north. So he'd kill a few of the residents, take some to guide him to the next village up north. They didn't have any gold either. And according to the secretary's record, they proceeded on to a country called Appalachia, which was the Indian nation around what is now Tallahassee. And Navacas' diary reports that when they entered the Appalachia territory, it was just like stepping into a hive of hornets. And they were some mean Indians. But the mouth of the Waukulla River and the St. Mark's River was well known to the Spanish and was mapped as a source of fresh water for the Spanish galleons heading back toward the Gulf Stream to head back to home. They would stop in Waukulla for a fresh water supply. Narvaez knew about that, and he knew it was a peninsula. So he retreated from the Tallahassee to get away from those mean Indians. He went down to this peninsula across the swamps into a location what we believe to be close to where the St. Mark's Lighthouse is right now. But he was kind of protected there by swamp. He sent escorts on to Pensacola to tell his ships to come back to St. Mark's and get them. Only to learn, because he's now been on the road almost a year, not the 6 months. He learned that his ships were not there. His scouts came back to tell him that the ships were not there. So he proceeded to order that we build some rafts, sailing rafts, to carry us back to Mexico. We can go around the coast of the Gulf to someplace on the Mexican coast. That was their plan. He directed it. It happened that he had a guy who had spent some time in a blacksmith shop who knew something about hammering hot iron. It's my sense that he had not completed his apprenticeship, but he had been around long enough to know how to heat iron. But iron and equipment and tools. Apparently, in contrast to most conquistadors on horse, they all carried a farrier, a blacksmith, to keep their horses shod. But Narvaez did not have a blacksmith with him. He did have horses, a lot of horses. But after learning that the ships were gone and we got to do something, we got to get out of here, he decided to build rafts. And he directed that everything iron would be refashioned into fasteners, including their swords. They kept their side knives, but their guns and their swords, all of their weaponry was put in and refashioned into fastening equipment for those rafts. Horses were sacrificed, and their hides were cut into strips for the making of running rigging. Clothes, any extra clothes were sewed together for sails. And in due course, they pushed off into the Gulf to go. A hurricane ran into them just off of Galveston, and it was almost 500 men on those rafts that departed St. Mark's. But off Galveston, only 7 survived. 7 got to shore. It happens that Navacus, the recorder, the secretary, was one of them. He continued his diaries.
Such is history.
Such is history. And he got with him. It took him 7 years, fascinating stories of their trek from Galveston back to Mexico City. They did make it to Mexico City. It took them 7 years. 7 years to make it. And Navacus' diary has been translated into English. Somebody has made a quick little movie of it, and I was privileged to see both. Fascinating stories. But I missed my story. National Degree of AFIC thought they'd like to document that is also. And through reasons not exactly certain to me, I was contacted about the blacksmithing role, and would I make appropriate tooling as probably they would have used at that time by a guy who was not a master blacksmith. And this is what they did. Would I consider making what tools I thought they would need? Yeah, I'll be glad to do that. And I proceeded to do that. I made saws, a hammer, a little anvil. I welded up horseshoes because they had plenty of horseshoes. 2 pair of tongs out of horseshoes. But I made a little anvil. I welded up, fire welded up, a little thing about 5.
Yeah.
2 layers of horseshoes that I welded up and nailed that to a flat surface, and it was excellent. It was just an excellent little anvil for what we were doing. And the agreement further was to construct a forge, as in the best of my knowledge that they might have done. And I know what I've done. I've stacked up rocks appropriate high, and using horse hide or deer hide or hog hide, because they had hog with them at the first part for bellows. I had all that figured out as how I would do it for the time. But my last contact with them, they were in St. Mark's, again doing background filming. The crew was there doing background filming. They weren't filming action. And the agreement was when they came back, they would want a forge built. They'd be ready to film action, and they didn't know when that would be. But they took all the equipment, everything I'd made. They saw, they appreciated it. They thought that was lovely. That's marvelous. Except for reasons I don't understand. The hammer and one of the saws. I made bow saws from scratch. And I imagined that I was using a gun barrel, but I actually was using hay rake tine that I flattened out and cut saws. We made bow saws. And they work superbly, by the way. And one of them is at San Luis now that they use to sing saw. And that one, plus my hammer, the hammer and the anvil, somehow they looked at and didn't get moved from my pickup truck into their panel trucks. And lo and behold, when I got home, I had the hammer that belonged to them, which was made from horseshoes. I fire welded up horseshoes to make a hammer. And the little anvil that I had welded. I had a call from the contact person. to tell me they'd gone on to New Orleans to do some, they left here. I knew they were going to New Orleans to do more background filming. Yeah. And lo and behold, the first night there, the panel truck that carried their 3 cameras and all the blacksmith stuff, plus a whole bunch of other stuff, had been stolen. This was 3 weeks after the fact. They had no contact with, no, where in the world it went. No knowledge. I haven't heard from them since then. So, arms to plowshares, I think that's what you were referring to. A marvelous period in my career. But besides that, since I've retired and somewhat through San Luis, in fact, I've had a lot of major contracts from White Springs at the Stephen Foster State Park, where I did a lot of blacksmithing there, keeping their forge going. It was just amazing. Pure tourists coming through, fascinated with what the blacksmith was doing, and in due course asked me if I did these sorts of things. Yes, I do. Would you do some to me? Yes, I will. I had a number of very nice, lucrative contracts that I got from my contacts at the blacksmith shop in White Springs. One particular one that I just want to recount one day. A man sat there a good long while watching me hammering. And it happens that I did the hinges, the fancy hinges for the lock-up closets in that blacksmith shop. And they're of a Spanish motif, rather fancy.
Of a strap hinge.
No, this is real ornate hinges.
Oh, okay.
Real ornate. They're on the doors. They're on the door.
Okay.
Not on the shutters.
That's right.
The shutters are strap hinges.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. I participated in those, but the Blacksmith Association made those and installed them. We had a meeting there and did that. But in due course, this particular person I'm talking about wanted to know if I'd made those hinges or on door. Yes, sir, I did. Yeah, well, I do really like those. Make the conversation short. He said, I'd really like some of those. I'm building a barn, and that hinge is really what I would want for that, but I would want them so long and so wide, but that exact pattern, if you can do that pattern, yes sir, I can do that. And my thought was, a pair or 2 of those, I could whip that out good. Yeah. But that conversation resulted in, he had asked me yet how much you want. He said, well, if you can make that, I'd really appreciate you making those for me. How many pairs would you like? 15. 15 pairs. Now that's one devil of a lot of chiseling, because all the intricate designs I chisel out. I chisel out hot, see. 15. But a thought occurred to me at the same time. He had asked me how much I'm going to charge him for. Either. So I said, yes sir, I'll do it, but it's going to take me a while to get them done. He says, that's good. When you're finished with them, call me and I'll either come to Tallahassee, pick them up, or if you're coming here, bring them here and I'll pick them up here. I says, okay. It took me, I think, about 3 months before I had them all ready. And I called him and told him I had them ready and I was going to White Springs on a certain date when he'd like to come pick them up. Sure will. How big a check do you want me to bring with me? That's all he asked. And I told him. He didn't even swallow hard. He had the check with him when he got there, and he was very impressed, so pleased with it. There were a number of those, David, from White Springs that I want to mention. Significant commissions and contracts to do significant ironwork. Another one of immediate thought. Are you familiar with the glass cathedral in North Carolina?
I've heard of it, yeah.
Yeah, I have been there. One day a lady was watching me do hammer hot iron in the White Springs shop when she asked me that she had seen the crosses, Christian crosses I'd made that were in the gift shop. And she says, I bought one of those, but I need one about 4 feet high. and not out of that little stuff, but some big stuff. Yes, ma'am. Could you make that? I think so. I think so. I could make that. Says, I am some big shot associated with the Crystal Cathedral in so-and-so, North Carolina. And a Christian cross like this, with that star in the middle, with the diamond in the middle. It would sure be appropriate for that. Will you make us one? Yes, ma'am, I'll make you one. How long will it take you to make it, you reckon? I said, that's a lot of work. I'm going to say I cannot have it ready in 2 months because I got a lot of other things to be doing too. That's okay. That's okay. When you get it finished, just call me, and I'll either come to your place or come here to White Springs, and you just tell me where it is, and I'll come get it. Same thing with her. In due course, I called her. It was ready. I made it. I think I made it from 3x3 solid steel. And I think it was 40 inches high. No. I made it. Nice cross, no mount. They would mount it. They didn't need a mount of any sort. But the sucker weighed right at 100 pounds.
Oh, yeah.
It did. It happened the same way as the man from Gainesville. When I called her and told her it was ready, she says, what you want me to make the check out for? And I've done a whole bunch of those, David, of the significant contracts from San Luis. There's more from White Springs, a number of them from my just demonstrating at craft fairs here and yonder. Of folks want me to do something special for them, for which I got paid. Many of them want to know what you're going to charge. Many of them argue with me, and I go with whatever I said originally. You don't argue me down. You don't argue me down. Here, I can take some other blacksmiths that might be able to do it cheaper, and here's their names. Give me your card, and I will send you their phone numbers. And I've done that for a whole bunch of folks. A number of those called me back and asked me, would I make it? After talking to these professional boys. But from Virginia, Texas. Well, another fascinating thing that I've done that I've enjoyed. Steamer trunks, immigrant trunks, like the Irish brought over, or the early immigrants to America, the trunks that they brought their stuff in.
Like a wooden trunk?
Yeah, they're wooden trunk with iron fixtures, iron hinges, and iron locks. Well, I've done a number of those. I've redone the hardware for immigrant trunks that have come down to the people of today that have great-grandfather and grandmother's trunk. They want to redo it, and the ironwork is all rusty, bad rusty. They want that redone. One special one was one Sunday night. I had a call from a lady who identified herself, but she was from Savannah, Georgia, calling me on a Sunday night. I never did ask her, how did you get my name and phone number? But she was calling because she had the steamer, the trunk, that belonged to her great-great-great-great-great-granddaddy, many times removed, who she knows for a fact came with Oglethorpe to the colony of Georgia.
Wow.
Was an officer on Oglethorpe's ship. This is a great-grandmother, 90 times granddaughter, 90 times removed, that this trunk has come down to. And the ironwork is in bad repair. A lot of the wood is rotten. And she's got a cabinet maker in Savannah that's working on the wood. And she was told that I could repair the lock and the hasps. Yes, ma'am. I think I can. I think I can. I'd be willing to try. So he says, if I send you all the iron pieces I got, I need a lock, I need a hasp, I think two hinges, two full hinges. I think that's all she wanted. Let me send you everything I got. And if you can reproduce it, I'd appreciate it. I got it. It was personally hand-delivered, insured for $25,000. It's what she insured this rusty iron. I opened it up and truly it was a pile of rusty mess. But I could piece out the pieces. I could piece out all the pieces. And I used wrought iron. I used real wrought iron and reconstructed the 2 hinges, the lock, 2 keys to go with the lock, a hasp based on the best I could from her pieces. I redid all that for her. And when I was all I had written her back that I got it in good shape, and that I would proceed to making them. I wrote her back that. But I didn't have no correspondence with her again until I had them finished. And I called her on the telephone, told her I had it finished, and I was fixing to mail them back to her. And she says, include your statement. I said, yes, ma'am. And I wrapped it up. I insured with all the rusty parts, all her parts I put back in there. And I insured it for $50. Guaranteed delivery, though. Most of that $50 was guaranteed
delivery, right.
And she got it next day. And she called me, told me how so thrilled and pleased she was, and that my bill was reasonable. I think I charged her $300. That my bill was reasonable. She'd put a check in the mail that day. I got the mail into check in 2 or 3 days for $500.
Wow.
I still don't know how in the devil that woman got my name. But growing out of that, there's another similar one in DeLand, Florida, at a FABA meeting. Somebody who knows me came up and said, there's a lady here that needs a lock reproduced, and she's looking for a blacksmith to do it. You do locks. Do you want to go talk to her? Yep, I'll go talk to her. She had a immigrant trunk, too, that her great-grandfather and grandmother had brought over on the steamship. All their worldly belongings were in this box. Then it come down to her, and her problem was the lock. She had a key. But that lock was a rusty mess. It had water on it or something. But it was no whole piece of that lock, including the face that it inset. Inset into it. And it was nailed in, clinked over on the back. This lock was. So what you want me to do is to reproduce that lock.
And have the key fitted.
Defeat this key.
Her key fitted.
Her key.
Her key. I knew that.
That came with the grandparents. Her key. I said, well, I might have to take that off, where I can look at the guts in it. It worked out. It didn't make any difference because I couldn't tell too much for the guts anyway.
They're all just slobbered up.
Yeah. But I took these old nails out. Oh, including the lady in Savannah, there were wrought nails. Everything was put on with wrought nails and clinched on her chest. And I counted up and made wrought iron. I made wrought nails out of wrought iron for her. The number that were required, plus a whole bunch of extras that I sent back to her, too. But for this lady, there were also wrought nails holding this lock in. It was bent over. Her son came in about the time that I was getting ready to take this lock off. He's going to tear up your trunk, Mama. Mama, you don't want to have that done. Mama, he's going to tear up that truck. He's trying to take off that lock, Mama. Well, let's go inside and talk about it. In a minute, Mama came back, take it off. That's no joke. I felt really embarrassed that son and Mama were disagreeing on what I was in the process of doing, taking that lock off.
Sure.
She's lived in the land, but I got it off. And I took it home with me and I redid it. I made her a brand new lock. And hers was modern steel, by the way. It was not all wrought iron. That was. So I used modern steel and made it fit her lock, fit her key. I made her an extra key to go with it.
Right.
Just for fun. And called her. She had asked me would I bring it back and reinstall it. So put it back on. Yeah, I'd be glad to do that. So when I'd finished it, I called her and made an appointment on a Saturday, and Lou and I drove down to install her lock, which I did. And she had prepared I don't know how to describe, maybe 4 meats, 1,900 vegetables, 7 desserts, iced tea, sweet milk, buttermilk, coffee for lunch. That she had prepared for me and Luke to have lunch with her, after we got the lock on. And we did. We got the lock on, but that was another one of those. I think I only charged her $135 for doing it, but she gave me a check for $200.
So
Those are just some quick examples. I've done the most recent. Have to tell you about the most recent, David. The Tallahassee Memorial Hospital has a separate building that's called the Cancer Center. As a part of that building, there is a beautiful garden on the side of it that they call the Healing Garden. I need to quit. Nope, the Healing Garden. And I was contacted again by mechanisms that I don't know about making a garden arbor as the entrance to this garden. Right? And the chairman of the committee that was calling me is a lady by the name of Ms. Warren. And after considerable conversation on the telephone about it, and my actually going to the center and sitting in the garden and seeing what she wanted and where the committee wanted it, I recommended 3 or 4 people in Tallahassee that could really do a super job on that. But it ended up by me begging her, take your foot off my neck, let me off the ground, and I'll see if I can make it. Which I proceeded to do. I made it by run 2x2, heavy duty, heavy thickness tubing. It's 8 feet tall in the center, 6.5 feet on each end, 16 wide panels on each end, 16-inch wide arch that goes over it with all sorts of fancy scrolls that fill up the negative space in there. And it's set in when it's finally put up, it was made in 3 parts.
like gall.
Yeah, very heavy.
Very
made in
heavy.
3 parts. It was heavier when I got done with the part than I thought it would be. Because it took 2 men, and me to pick up the upright pieces. And I made it 3 parts to be bolted together when we get it to site. And the plan was to place it in concrete, which we did. And on the appointed salary, the committee allowed to have me men there to help me install it, which they did. And we got there at the appointed hour, and their volunteers were there to help put it up. We dug the holes, bolted together the 3 pieces, and it was a strain when we set it up. It's because I had feet on it to fit into the concrete base. It
So you had
set up by itself. Picked that up and put it in the holes. Right? And there's 4 men and a boy, a strong-looking boy. Then when I said we need to put it in those holes, they grabbed it, and I didn't have a hand on it. But they strained and grunted. They set it up and moved it 1 step, set it out. Picked it up, moved it up, set it out. One of them said, now when we get it over there, they didn't have to move it far to get to the holes. Oh. Some of y'all go to town and get some help, because we're going to have to pick this up to get it in that hole. But I have received a whole lot of accolades. Yeah. That's the last significant piece. No, it didn't. That's not the last significant piece I've done. I installed that in the latter part of March. That piece was installed. I had it powder coated for treatment. I put it together and powder coated it and didn't put it in. My wife thinks it's a very beautiful piece. When I came home with sketches, what I'm going to do, she'll add, you'll never get done with that. I said, well, if you'll help me lift, I'll get it done. Well, she didn't help me lift very much.
Tell me about FABA's mission as you see it. What's FABA doing. What have you been doing with FABA? How have you used it to get what you wanted to have done, or have failed? Is it succeeding or failing or?
First, I'm a charter member of FABA, and served on the first board, and served on the board, it seems like, for 900 years. If it's been an organization that long, for a very long time. Served as chairperson of the scholarships committee, served as historian, never served as president, have been challenged a number of times to run for president, but I've never served as a president. And I think I've held some other officers. Mr. Payton, in an earlier interview, quoted to you the stated organizational purpose of the organization, which is training. And I've come in recent years to worry about a little our stated mission, which is, as Mr. Payton emphasized, the training of young people into the art and craft of blacksmithing. I have observed in the last 2 or 3 years where pre-advertising for a meeting was open forges for beginners with no announced program. Attendance is exceedingly limited. It's my proposition for us old goats, for us, the dues-paying members of FABA, the backbone or the railroad upon which FABA runs. If you don't provide us a reason to be at the meeting, if all you're going to do at the meeting is teach beginners how to keep from burning themselves, I'm not interested in going, because a lot of you young guys who just went through this 2 weeks ago, you're now anxious to teach these new guys what you learned, and I like that. I have no problem with that. But that has no challenge for me. That has no reason for me to attend. I worry a little, Mr. Editor, about our total emphasis on training young people, neglecting the needs of us older people, of us older smiths. Teach us a new technique. Challenge us with something new, with a guy, not necessarily who's been doing this for 1,000 years, because every demonstrator I've ever watched, whether he started his blacksmithing 3 weeks ago or has been at it for 90 years, if I listen and pay attention, I learn something. And for so often, I've been blacksmithing a long time. I got plenty of scars to show for my length. I have not watched a demonstrator with care, ever, that I didn't learn something. So often in recent years, it's one of these, dang, why didn't I think of that? It's a something that I do to end up with the same product, but he does in such a slick way. Dang, why didn't I think of that? Save some time.
And maybe it's been done in front of you and told you 6 times.
Probably.
But there's finally it goes,
That's right.
oh, I could do that.
That's right. Yeah. I can get out with this, I can come up with the same end product. But he has a way to get in there in half the time, or in half the energy that I put in to get there. It's one of those, usually, that I call, dang, I should have thought of that. Well, I learned something at every blacksmith meeting where I pay attention. So, in terms of our mission of FABA, through Willard's efforts, through Willard Smith's efforts, there was some trouble in the early days of trying to keep us together. Willard trying to organize something challenging enough to bring the folks together. And our first several meetings were at the Junior Museum. We've been to the Junior Museum. Kind of. And he worried a lot about how to keep us at a monthly meeting. And we did. And I contribute that to Willard's charisma, for bringing us together and keeping us together. And the division to give folks opportunity. We had a lot of complaints. Willard had a lot of complaints earlier. Well, all your meetings are in the Tallahassee area. Have you got a forge we can go to? Nope. Nope. That was the beginning stimulus for the organizing of Florida into the 4 districts, in which there's half a meeting every month by district in Florida. 4 of them a month, 4 meetings a month. And we'll have one in Tallahassee. We'll be the northwest section. We'll have one up here. And the board divided up who would have what. You know, what day. Second Saturday, third Saturdays, and fourth as we now do. And I think that's worked exceedingly well for giving a sense of camaraderie and a singularness of purpose for the blacksmiths.
A more handleable group.
A more handleable group. And we know each other.
Yeah.
They know each other. And that's valuable.
Yeah.
So I know that the current emphasis is we got to train young people. We got to train young people or the craft's going to die. Well, I say the organization is going to die unless you give some attention to us old folks. That includes me, in spite of my age of 39.
As you were talking about your career and the blacksmithing intertwined, I got this thing that I've studied some other things too, of the skill of your youth is back in the back of your mind, but you don't have the time, the space, the leisure to do the thing. And I think that something like blacksmithing is often seen where it lies dormant in a person from 23 to 52, and then they're back because they've got a little scratch, they've got a little time. Now they can do something that was it conflicted. The kids needed diapers, and the car
right.
was broken, and
That's true with me. You know, after my retirement from the state government, I felt like I had time to play. But I'd built my masonry forge before that. I'd had my masonry forge a good while. But I did. I did in my retirement, as I tell everybody retirement, have a plan for retirement before your last day at work. And I had a plan, complete with an hourly schedule.
Wow.
I had developed a plan. And it worked very well for the first 2 or 3 days. Actually, it's much longer than that. But I was so fascinated at San Luis that I volunteered. We was out there, we docents, 2 of us per Saturday. We were only there on Saturdays. And the site was open every day, but you get a tour on Saturdays. That was advertised. But pretty soon, I was going every Saturday pretty soon because of my interest in a whole number of things, and the staff there needing certain things like the lawn mowed. I knew how to mow the lawn. I'd crank up the tractor and mow the lawn. Well, it's after my retirement, I guess within 8 months, I was spending 3 or 4 days, full days, a week at San Luis, doing guiding and miscellaneous stuff. I've done a lot of the cabinetry out there that they use today. A lot of stuff that they use today. And just as a point of interest, because of my volunteer work there, at one time some years ago, I was elected Tallahassee and Leon County's Volunteer of the Year that I got because of my work with San Luis.
was it just San Luis, or were you also with the Red Cross?
I got that was another Volunteer of the Year award for work with the Red Cross. That's different.
And my spies are everywhere.
That's different. So, organizationally, and FABA, and our Mr. Payton mentioned our disillusionment with FABA. We started off as a chapter. We're now an affiliate. And there's a lot of us that continue to worry about Abana. And its attention to the run-of-the-mill grassroots folks like me. Like me. But we're because of fiasco we had over shooting the Anvil with Fava. I mean, with
Havana.
with Havana. You know, we withdrew. We withdrew from Havana, as did most of the other southern states at one time, which caused Havana to change its system, and they now have affiliates, not formal chapters, and they don't guide us, and they now have legal accountability for us, which they thought they did when we were chapters. So I still feel a lot of strain with Havana, because I don't see their big international convention that's coming off next month or later this month.
Later this month, yeah.
Later this month. I don't see very much there to cause me to want to go to the meeting. You know, I don't see very much that will fit with me at my stage in blacksmithing. No, I don't know. Oh well.
Yeah, there may be people that is their thing, and I suppose we've got to allow that, right?
Yeah, and I can find them.
Madison
Probably.
seems more interesting to me.
I've been to 2 Havana meetings. The Madison meeting is much more attuned to the things that I'm personally interested in, which is okay. Oh well.
Okay, one more thing. I think we're wearing down. Tell me about Barbados.
Now, how do you know about Barbados?
Spies.
That's another one of my fun things, Dr. Reddy. I'm surprised. That's one of my fun volunteers things. Again, I don't know how come, but a number of years ago, I was invited by the Barbadian government. That's the most easternmost island of the what do you call that? Western Antilles.
The Antilles, yeah, something like that.
I was invited by the government. They were developing a heritage village. They were trying to gather into one place on property they owned. The arts and crafts that were the sustenance of Barbados in the year 1930, a focus year. And among those things that were important to the economy of Barbados in 1930 was a blacksmith. And virtually every little settlement had a blacksmith. And the blacksmith kept the economy going. But lo and behold, they had one blacksmith who lived through that, who was too old to pick up a hammer and was not interested in developing a blacksmith shop, in building and outfitting a blacksmith shop. And he wasn't able. They had got my name as a blacksmith who had great interest in the antiquities of blacksmithing, and they were inviting me to come to Barbados to they had built a building that they were designating the blacksmith shop. It would be my job to make it look like a blacksmith shop and to be able to do a hammering of hot iron in it. I accepted the challenge and went at their expense. Spent 2 weeks. 2 weeks in Barbados. Had their building. It was a pleasure to meet their one blacksmith shop. My host, which was the organization that gives attention to current antiquities and the maintenance of heritage stuff, which we got one in the U.S., we got one in Florida. They had one in Barbados.
Folk life?
No.
No.
Yeah. But this group was involved with folk life.
Uh-huh.
But anyway, they were my host when I was there. And the first day, I was picked up at night. Lou went with me. Picked up at night at the airport and carried to a motel right on the ocean. Step out of double door of this motel where they had me about 20 steps over there, and you were in the Caribbean Sea.
Oh.
As clear as crystal. Oh, marvelous. The refrigerator was stocked with interesting stuff. The pantry was stocked with interesting stuff, too. That was our first night there. Next morning, he picked me up at 8:30. and did a short tour. But among the things, he had made arrangements with their surviving blacksmith to meet us at his blacksmith shop, and for me to meet him, and this guy to say a blessing over me.
Yeah, that's big.
Yeah. And I went to his shop. I won't bore you with that, but the bottom line, he was speaking Barbadian. They speak English. I could not understand a word. The natives were talking to each other, or this man to me, but my host spoke excellent English. And he translated. He translated what I said. No, this guy understood most of what I said, but I couldn't understand a thing of what he said. So he showed me enough. I'd done all the research I could for it, and I'd used an English colony, early English blacksmithing. That would have been appropriate in the colonies. You know, what did they do? I'd read everything the library could produce for me, and missed. The most exciting thing I saw was this blacksmith's forge. His forge in his old shop. Oh, by the way, his forge, which on 3 walls had corrugated fastening, it was a big place. Very big, very big. But over here in the middle was sliding doors. I didn't see those, but he wanted me to meet his sons. Went over here to this certain place and he slid back these 2 sliding doors. And here's a machine shop back of there. That's 23rd century. His 2 sons were mechanical engineers. Both had been trained in England. They were back there operating a machine shop that would do anything under this sun. That was his sons.
There you go.
He had sent them to England for education. But point is, me and this gentleman had a lot of conversation. He asked me a lot of probing questions. He said he made his living. He said, I made my money welding truck springs. Putting truck springs because we had a lot of big trucks that hauled this cane and did a lot of the hauling.
A lot of potholes.
A lot of potholes. They hadn't fixed those, by the way, when I was there. He says, my bread and butter, and I sent my boys to college welding truck springs. How would you weld a truck spring? He asked me. Luckily, I've welded some truck springs. And I proceeded to tell him how I would fire weld a truck spring and how I would normalize it. Once you fire weld a truck spring, you've got some very, very brittle spots on each side of your weld.
Yeah.
You have to normalize those. And I told him all that. He pointed to my host, and he said, this guy told me, later, what he told me was, you got yourself a real blacksmith there. That was the most complimentary thing that occurred to me. But I never saw him again. But anyway, I did. Stayed 2 weeks. What they thought was a blacksmith shop had burned down years and years and years and years ago. And this heritage group had inherited it from the widow. They could have it. They had had it in a warehouse for 25, 35 years. Now we're building a blacksmith shop. They had all that stuff brought to the building that I'm supposed to convert into a blacksmith shop. His blacksmith burned by fire. Most exciting thing there was the leaves of a bellows, a English type fan bellows. The leaves were 1.25 inches, 1 piece of oak wood that was 52 inches wide.
Wow.
1 piece of oak, David.
Wow.
Lord. And there were 3 of those, and the bellows, he had patched that with a piece of boot. He had several pieces of canvas. He had a piece of rubberized raincoat nailed in here and there where he had bent the holes, where holes had been burned in his canvas, and some leather, but was no good. That was no good, and I took all that. First thing I had to do was take all that apart. Did trouble getting leather. And they had to order leather from another island. And it was brought over to us by plane. They bought leather, appropriate for the bellows for me to redo. But the forge. Let me go back to the original blacksmith shop. In besides him, his forge. He wanted to see. His forge was some wooden pegs driven in the ground. This man had made lots of money blacksmithing. 4 pegs driven into the ground with what was not a 2x4, but a slab of wood nailed across this way. And on each side was a slab of wood nailed on. On the top of this whole thing was a piece of galvanized metal, the likes of which is on roofs that covered this whole thing.
Uh-huh.
And back on this end was a piece of galvanized metal that came up about 18 inches. It covered one end. A tabletop right here. Back here was about a 2 foot by 2 foot square piece of 1/4 inch steel, just lying on this galvanized stuff. And right here in this firewall was a 3/4 inch piece of galvanized water pipe coming out about 3 inches that laid flat on this piece of steel. Back here, he had an electric blower that he turned on by taking blank electric wire, hook it to another blank electric wire up here to turn on an electric blower. But not on a piece of steel. There was a white piece of what I thought was slate, piece of 1/4 inch plate, and then about 1 inch of what, looking at, looked like a piece of marble. You know. Then he built his fire on that, and air came in horizontally to his fire. That was very revealing. I had seen no reference to that nowhere in trying to research what kind of forge they'd have. You know, and I asked him, yeah. And the man I was with, he said, all the forges, and I was carried by my host to one of their tourist traps, a sugar factory, and to another one that was closed down. But both of them had a blacksmith shop. Each of them had a full-time blacksmith shop. And their forges were the same. Both of them in the sugar places, the little galvanized pipe just came out onto a flat piece of cement. That's where they built their fire. Asking the host, when I got putting up my back to the blacksmith shop, what's that piece of marble that was in his original blacksmith shop? He didn't know, but he'd ask. And anyway, they asked this guy, you have to have that. You have to have that to hold your fire. You know, you can't build it on that piece of steel. It'll burn through. He came back to tell me. That was limestone, which the island is limestone. And it's limestone, crushed it up, mixed with 3-year-old molasses. Mixed up into a dough type thing, put in a form where you want it to stay. Use a little wooden form, just build your little form about each stick, pour it in there, and let it sit 2 days, and it'll be hard enough to build a fire on. As soon as you build a fire on, it gets real hard.
That's great.
That's what we did. I built that for the blacksmith shop that we built. But that was an exceedingly exciting time. I went back a second time because they tried to find somebody to be their blacksmith. They tried to hire somebody to come in for me to give the basic rudiments of blacksmithing. They didn't have one. So we came home after 2 weeks, and then several weeks, I don't know the time, but several weeks later I had a call that they had a guy who has no experience but is willing to try to be the blacksmith, and would I come back? And I went back. Lou and I went back for a week for the purpose of trying to orient him into how to hire iron. The first time as we were leaving, my host, all those got terribly anxious because a very, very, very big opening celebration was scheduled the last Friday night before I was to come back home on Sunday. And as the second week began to go, they began to worry more and more and more and more and more that I wasn't going to be ready. And the Governor General, who's appointed by the Queen, by the way, the Governor General is coming through. This has got to be ready. Huh? It's going to be ready. Put back on your pants. This is a woman. put back on your panties. This is going to be ready. Just get out of my way. It's going to be ready. and I was instructed. I mean, I was instructed how to appear with, what not to do with the Governor General.
Yeah.
Because the Governor General, when he came through, his entourage and the TV would all be coming through, doing all of him. And I was to be standing when he came. I was not to sit down while he was there, and all that. I mean, I was schooled in what to do. I had my own garb. I was dressed appropriately.
That's good.
Yeah, I was told that earlier, and I thought I was going to be wearing it every day, so I carried stuff from here. That was appropriate. But anyway, the Governor General arrived at the locked gate down front. It was always locked, with a flare of trumpets. I knew he was here when the trumpets went off. And I was next to the last stop on this tour. And I knew they were coming because TV lights and the crowd, they were all just like the President of the United States, He was a black man, great big black man. And he came around and walked. The blacksmith shop was such, we'd fixed you. You come in the door, a rope here that guides you back out another door. The blacksmithing went on over here. And I had my entrance rope up. It was a solid rope. But the Governor General came in and reached over and shook my hand. And I know my lady host liked to have fainted. And he reached over and shook my hand.
You were probably all dirty.
And I got to tell you about my childhood blacksmith. He told me that. He reached over and unhooked that thing. Walked in there, and there was I think a bag of coal. He sloshed that around, sat down on that bag of coal. And proceeded to tell me about the blacksmith shop when he was a boy and when he grew up around here. And that he had heard about my presence and he even knew my name, Skeeter. I'd been in the newspaper, by the way, several times already. But he knew my name, and he was so proud that I was there. And that if anything he could do for me while I was here, either come to my office or have these folks to call me. But my little host, there was a woman and a man who were the big shots of this agency that was hosting me. They were shocked, one, but they were overwhelmed.
And overjoyed.
And overjoyed. But I did go back, and the student, he was pretty studious. He was pretty studious, but his work ethic was about the same of any 3-month-old I've ever met.
Oh.
He was not very interested in work. And it got hot. Got real hot in there.
In Barbados. There.
Yeah, in the blacksmith shop too. It got real hot in there. Anyway, he was doing very adequately. It was time for us to leave. I spent a whole week with him. We did nothing but hammer hot iron. And I was trying to teach him trinkets to sell in their gift shop. And they had visitors literally all over the world. Cruise ships would stop there, and they'd take cruises. They'd take tours over the island, And I met some terribly interesting folks myself from all over this world. Just a week that I was hammering in there, while we were hammering in there. But apparently it went from bad to worse, and the last account I had was an indirect message. It was an indirect message that the blacksmith shop had burned down. And they managed to salvage the bellows.
Oh, wow.
That's the only thing they salvaged. I was so proud to see those bellows. On the inside it had a engraved brass, or copper, something, made by something company, some town in England. But the size of those old planks,
Yeah.
and there were 3 of them. I was so impressed. And they were heavy. It was difficult for me by myself to lift up one of them.
Wow.
Well, David, you sucked me for more than I know.
Well, we'll have to save up your brains for next time, but I think we've got a really good interview here.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Skeeter Prather from Tallahassee, Florida. My interviewer has been the preeminent Dr. David Reddy, who by training and desire is an anthropologist. But he hasn't dug into any of my past yet, and I want us to quit before he puts on his anthropological hat. Good day, all.